Realism is one of the main discussions in online communities for games like Session, Skater Excel, and it'd be very easy to fall down that rabbit hole and let it become like a stigma. So let's not let that happen as a community, all right? But if your objective is realism and you're trying to film a line and it looks like this, well, I've got good news for you. You got room for improvement, all right? And even better news, I'm making this series to help you out with that improvement, all right? So actually, welcome to this series in which I explain real-life skate filming techniques and how to apply them to games like Session or Skater Excel or Goat Simulator 3, whatever you play that requires you to do a little bit of realism, all right? And if you so choose, all right, to help you better set you on your path towards achieving that goal, all right? So, because we're actually focusing on the camera work itself and the real-world techniques used in the industry, we're not spending any time on the basic functionalities of the replay editor, all right? Which means if you do need help figuring out which button I clicked to do what, pause this video, go take a look at the replay editor tutorials that I put in the description, all right? And then come back, all right? Because for the sake of brevity, I really want to just focus on the actual camera work techniques. And focusing on the reason and rhyme, the why we do the things we do, the way we do them in skate filming, all right? Kickflip front nose on a rail, even if it's a square one, still a rail, all right? Pretty good. So let's take a look at that clip one more time and point out a few things that I find that were wrong with it, all right? It's my own clip, all right? So I'm not throwing shade anywhere except on myself, all right? The way you should. So playback is at half speed right now so that I can talk a little bit while we watch at the same time. You need to keep in mind that this needs to look like an actual person filmed it, all right? So the first thing that takes away from this is twitchy camera work, all right? Your camera is bopping around from one cool angle to the next, all right? Let's take a look at the actual keyframes. This is a cool angle. This is a cool one. This is a fine one as well. This is basically the screenshot they used to sell their game. So of course it's in there, and so on and so forth. But if you splice all that together, it looks like it's just a machine doing all that little wobbly shaking from place to next, all right? So that is very detrimental, all right? You need to forget about cool camera angles to start. Next, one of the biggest things that I see online often is just this, an abrupt stop, all right? There are ways to fix that. You'll be able to see when I show you exactly what keyframes I put in and where. There are a few extra things that I've seen online that people tend to say or recommend that I would definitely disagree with. One is the camera shake function, all right? So usually, let's add some camera shake to just take a look at what I mean, all right? 20 camera shake, not that much. I've seen people put much more than that. A filmer does tend to have a steady hand, all right? Especially during trick execution. So they won't be shaky and twitchy and overly excited, all right? Because that would just be a moment where the filmer says, oh man, you know what? I went a little bit crazy there. Could you do it again? And that is a big no-no, all right? Forget about camera shake for now. At the very most, camera shake can occur in a major way when the filmer pushes on their own board to keep up with the actual skater, all right? But for the sake of brevity, again, we're gonna leave that maybe for another video. Details on realism when filming a line. And the other thing that's the most primordial one in order to have a realistic line is the filmer needs to match their speed with the skater, all right? That's the first thing that we're gonna be attacking. Right, so you got your clip, you wanna make it better, you wanna make it more realistic, and you wanna do that through filming, all right? So start from scratch, all right? I'm gonna show you my approach in filming a line, all right? It is not the way, it is my way, and it is just the beginning for you to find your way, all right? Take it or leave it. I go about it in 5 steps, separated into 2 phases. The first phase is setting up the filmer's line, the filmer's track that they follow alongside the skater during the line. We're not actually filming the tricks themselves until phase 2, all right? So the first 3 steps that I'm going to show you are dedicated to just the filmer and where they're going, all right? Let's do that right now. So the first thing that I do is I set up right up against the start of my clip, one keyframe, the starting keyframe. You want to make sure that the first obstacle is in the frame, keeping a major part of the frame's real estate, all right? So the bench is there, you see it, and the skater's off in the background, you can see them approach, all right? That's keyframe number 1. Next, let's go to the end of the clip, all the way to the end. And we're gonna choose an ending frame, all right? So I'm right up against the end of this clip, right? You can see it on my timeline. This is the keyframe that I wanna have, setting it in right there.
Yo, this is Haloof from editing. With my watchful, omnipresent eye, I spot missing details and inconsistencies that Haloof from recording leaves behind. And with my benevolent mouth, I correct them within your mind, so that you may finish this video optimally enlightened. Now, the reason the abrupt stop even happens is because there is no further keyframe to keep the camera moving. Adding a keyframe at the end of your clip, even if it's the same keyframe as the one just before it, keeps the camera smoothly swaying just right. Make it your general practice to always put in keyframes at the start and end of your clips, regardless of what you're filming. It's always better.
That was step 1, the start and the end frame. Make sure that the obstacle that you're about to skate here is occupying a lot of real estate on screen, and make sure that the obstacle you just skated at the end is occupying a lot of real estate on screen. That would be the standard that would be recommended by most filmers, I believe, all right? Do correct me if you feel like correcting me. Step 2 is you put in a frame where you think that the filmer is going to start physically following the skater, all right? So I think right around here, I put in this keyframe. This is when I think the filmer is gonna throw down their board and start pushing, all right? And the next is when the filmer will stop moving, all right? We're still in step 2, the filmer's start and stop of movement, all right? So right here, this is the part where I think the filmer stops, comes to a stop. And that looks like that, all right? For the moment, that's what it looks like. We will fix it, don't worry about it. So step 3 will be fine-tuning the filmer's position in the line, right? So the filmer right now is passing the camera under the bench. We don't want that. And the best way that I found to fix this is go somewhere in the middle of the line, not in the middle of a trick, and put one keyframe where you think the filmer would be realistically. So this would be ideal. Filming the skater's front side is a bit of a rule of thumb, as much as possible, all right? That's how you get the steez to stand out, rather than filming their backside as such, right? Butt jokes. So, realistically, would the filmer be here? We just filmed a front crook, and we're not that far from the bench yet. So actually, skater front side is not realistically possible. Let's instead opt for a close-up on the shoe, all right? So that's the middle keyframe. That was step 3, fixing the trajectory and fine-tuning the filmer's trajectory. So all in all, setting up the filmer's trajectory was done in 5 keyframes. You can see them on screen. Let's take a look at how that looks right now, all right? It's gonna look like garbage. Don't worry about it. Just so you know, looks like garbage. Everything is improperly framed. Everything is not seen properly, but the filmer is doing their business properly, all right? Now we start filming the actual tricks in phase 2. And the way I go about this is for each trick, get one keyframe in the middle of the trick that looks good, all right? just one.
Yo, it's me again. Looks like my help was necessary a bit more often in this video than in the last one. That's okay though. Let me clarify something real quick here. The keyframes in step 3 are meant to give a bare bones idea of where the camera should be looking at any given moment in the timeline. But these keyframes are not set in stone. You can and you should come back to change them, or maybe even remove them if they cause too much trouble in the later steps. Because as you will see if you try it for yourself, they do tend to cause a bit of a ruckus. So the keyword for step 3 should be bare bones. If you keep that in mind, you should be fine.
So, we're a little bit far from the skater here. Let's close in on them. And do I want to keep the camera low, or do I want to have the camera up high and film the top of the bench a little bit? Let's say that I want to have this angle, right? The angle, again, that they use to sell their game with. So we have the nollie heel 5.0. It's relatively good. We have the front crook. It's good enough. And we have the tray. We want to have a really good angle on this tray flip. So, rule of thumb, keep the camera low to the ground. It's going to convey height and it's going to convey speed to the viewer. Okay, this is good. Now, we're going to fine-tune the speed of the filmer. And there's something very specific about what I'm saying here. No longer will you think in adjusting the camera angle so that it fits what you need, but you're gonna instead think the filmer is on their own trajectory right now. They're going in this direction. So if I move them forward on their own trajectory, I'm speeding them up. If I move them backward on their trajectory, I'm slowing them down. We want to fine-tune the filmer speed in that sense. And keep in mind that we already did the bulk of the work in the first phase. So we don't want to speed up or slow down too much. We just have to fine-tune so everything is in frame and everything makes sense, alright?
Okay, here is my biggest interjection so far. Allow me to give you a big picture understanding of this filmer speed thing real quick. If you aren't mindful of the filmer's speed, it will show up in your clip as snappy or erratic camera work or excessive changes in camera angle, all that badness that we already covered and explained why those are to be avoided. It just won't look like a person is filming. Now, all of the previous steps up until this point serve to place the camera in the correct general vicinity if your objective is realism in terms of filming. Which means that in this final step of the process, the key here is to be subtle when making changes in camera position. The best way that we've found to be appropriately subtle, yet still effective, is for you to imagine that you're adjusting an actual person's position in real space-time, keeping in mind all of this person's possibilities and limitations. A little bit as if you were an omnipresent and all-powerful God. Wink wink.
Now, I'm starting with this because in between these two benches, there's quite a lot of empty space, which allows room for the filmer to sneak actually a little bit of a shot of the skater's front side. I'm gonna see if this works, making sure that my keyframes are not too close to each other to avoid jumpy camera work. Let's see how that meshes with the rest. Okay, so we have one small fix here. Let's slow down the filmer just a tiny bit, alright? Like so. Now this leaves room for one of my favorite visual filmer tricks, so the tricks that the filmer can play on the viewer. We're getting a close-up on the shoes and on the trucks, and when the skater pops, it's a reveal. The bench comes into play immediately, but we don't really see it until then. It's a reveal. I love that. Now, to make sure this landing is properly framed, we're gonna go back to this keyframe. We're gonna fix it a bit. We're gonna just move behind the skater a little bit, move down, and center him properly. Let's see how that goes. Okay, let's keep the camera angle a little low here. Maybe this keyframe is gonna be a little bit extra. We're gonna see. I still don't like how the camera just sort of snaps from this side to that side. It's a little tiny bit robotic to my taste. So here's a technique that I use. I go to this keyframe, I've moved just a little bit down the timeline, and I don't change anything, I just add a keyframe. And I go back to the one that was bothering me and I remove it. Let's see how that looks. Much smoother, all right? This is a really important trick. Again, based on the fact that you don't want your keyframes to be too close together. Go ahead and bring the video back, take a look at that again, because it's a huge, useful trick and it's really simple but not very intuitive. So we got a shot of the tray, not very much to my liking, not very close, not very much in that danger zone. So let's move the filmer on closer to the skater without actually speeding them up or anything. And let's see how that looks. Alright, fair enough. Now we have a situation in which the filmer is a little bit overtaking the skater just too much. I want the filmer to start slowing down here, so I will move the filmer behind the skater a bit, slowing themselves down. Alright, so the filmer starts dragging their foot on the ground to slow down smoothly. That's how a filmer would go to keep the camera steady while they slow down, alright? And now this framing needs a little bit of fixing, alright? The reason why this happens.
Sometimes small details can go a very long way. So here's a small detail that's gonna really drive this point home. What we mean by the reason this happens is that the camera comes to a halt and then slowly drifts to its next keyframe. Now this is a problem that's very similar to the abrupt stop issue. It still breaks the feeling that a person is behind the camera. So we need to fix this. And here's how.
It's because there's a huge gap between this and this. In order to fix it, go a little bit down the timeline. Maybe change your framing just a tiny bit. I'm gonna move the camera up a little bit. Angle it downwards and see how that works. There we go. All right, so again, less is more, and experiment with how the keyframes affect each other. We're gonna fix this in the same way. You see the skater goes out of the frame and the camera sort of winds itself up for getting into motion. So we're gonna just move back down the timeline a little bit. Gonna get everything in frame as such, and let's take a look at how it looks. Now that is the last little thing that I would like to fix, that little popping out of frame right here. Let's see, is there a keyframe way too close? Not very much, so let's see if we can fix it by just moving the filmer back a little bit, slowing them down, all right? Let's take a look at this final result. So it's very smooth, very stable, everything is framed properly. At best, you get the sense that there is cooperation between two people. If your objective is realism, I feel like this is the baseline and the objective is met. So, at the very least though, everything is framed properly, there's no erratic camera behavior, and it doesn't feel like there's a machine calculating camera angle after camera angle, alright? I'm gonna use this clip as an example for a few rules of thumb that you might have seen and that might not be very intuitive to you. So, first thing being, the camera is always, more often than not, low to the ground, alright? And the reason for that is because when using a fisheye, this method really conveys intensity, speed, height, lots of good stuff to the actual viewer, alright? So it looks like a tray flip done at breakneck speeds. Alright, okay, so maybe not breakneck speed, but definitely break wrist speeds. Let's take a look at this bench, for example. So let's just do a little bit of stationary filming just for the heck of it, just free camming it, alright? if we film it just standing up, all right, as if you're holding the camera at shoulder height or belly button height, whatever, all right, and you're filming this front crook, looks fast, looks decent, it's a front crook, but this is a bench, all right? Like somebody's grandma would be sitting on this and I would think nothing of it, all right? It's a non-thought. And then if we do the same thing but close up and filmed from low to the ground, now just free camming it again, it's amazing. It looks huge. This looks like a sculpture, right? A front crook wasn't done on this bench. It was achieved, all right? Something happened. It was grandiose. Again, all of this by keeping the camera low to the ground, all right? It's a rule of thumb for a reason. Definitely not the way, but it is an industry standard. Keep that in mind when deviating from such. Another thing you might have come across is the decision between starting a line stationary, as in the filmer right now is waiting for the skater to come up before themselves starting to move, or a rolling start, all right, where the camera is already moving, the filmer is already moving beside the skater, all right? What goes into that decision? What helps a person choose one or the other, all right? So first of all, let me set it up and I'll show you what I mean. Let's take this first keyframe and let's change it up. Let's do this. Alright, camera's already rolling, skater comes into frame, and then we have the exact same line, alright? In game, for practical purposes, there is no reason you would opt for either or, alright? This is purely an in real life thing to go get that extra level of detail. So,
Here's a fun little question for you. Is a lie still a lie if the liar doesn't know that they're lying? I think that's just called ignorance. Even if we slap the word temporary on it, it's still ignorance, and it still warrants correction. And that's where I come in. Now, to say that there is no in-game reason to opt for a rolling start is in fact 100% incorrect, or if you prefer, 0% correct. The in-game reason to opt for a rolling start is the same as the real life reason. If the line starts with the skater going at very high speed, the filmer can't jumpstart their own speed fast enough. In real life, this would simply mean that the skater would zoom by the filmer, and then the filmer needs to push like a crazy person to catch up. And the skater would become tiny on screen for that time. In game, this causes an abrupt start, which is exactly the same as the abrupt stop, where the camera just starts flying. And we don't want that, because a human doesn't move that way. So it just won't feel like a human is filming. And that'll be my last interjection on this matter. You won't be hearing from me again for the rest of the video, but I won't be too far off, because while you still are subject to time and space, I am not. So I'll be keeping an eye on you and see how your filming is improving. Until then, let's just say I'll see you later.
if the skater's first trick is something that happens at a really high speed, the filmer will opt for a rolling start, because that's what's going to offer the most stable option in terms of camera work. All right, so we are going fast enough for this to be considered relatively fast. All right, the alternative of starting stationary, let's go back, let's undo my changes. Starting stationary means the first trick is not so fast. It will not be so hard for the filmer to match the skater's speed instantly. So that means the skater's coming in a little bit slower, or the trick here is very, very much more technical. So if this wasn't just nollie heel 5-0, but if this was maybe, let's say, Bigflip front nose, right? That would be bonkers to start a line with, all right? Well, you want to get all of the intricate details of that. You want to show it off in all its glory, all right? And starting with a rolling start is not going to offer as much detail. So that was it, all right? Enough is enough. Let's have a bit of a closing statement section here. We've covered a lot of basics. We've covered my approach, which again is not the approach, and I'm not the one who decides the industry standard. I've just observed it thousands of times at this point by watching lots of skate videos and replicating it myself, all right? Oh, he hit his face on the rail. That was bonkers. That's some Hall of Meat stuff right there. Keep in mind that you want to set up the filmer's movement first. Keep in mind that a filmer, an experienced filmer, would have a steady hand because that's what gives a shot value, all right? And it should be enough to get you started on your own journey and at least bump your progress up a notch, all right? In terms of realism, if such is your objective, all right? There's no one way to play this game. You do whatever the hell you want with it. It's a single player game. Don't let anyone online tell you otherwise. And if anyone does, well, then that's just them, all right? To each his own. So hit me up in the comments if you want anything explained in this manner, all right? Even if it's just how would you go about filming this or that trick, or if it's just for asking for more details on stuff that I've already covered. I do have a list of videos that I want to cover, right? So next video is probably going to be about long lens filming or about night filming because that's its own little special magic thing if done properly. And otherwise, I'll be checking the comments regularly here or on Reddit or wherever, right? So I'll be seeing you in the next one. And until then, wishing you patience for your practice in real life or in game. Peace.